Hello, I'm Ken Cross. Today, this video is about jobs. My jobs plan is called the Fair Jobs Plan. There are some real problems facing employment picture in the United States today. There are three general areas. There are problems for the working poor, there are problems for our country, and there are problems for small business in particular. The first, with the working poor, first problem is that there are not enough jobs for the working poor. I know today we seem a little bit at peace with the fact that the Bureau of Labor Standards has said that the unemployment rate is 4.9% and has come down from a much higher level. And that's good, except that's based on a designator they call U3, which is people that are unemployed, actively seeking work, and have looked for a job within the last 4 weeks. There is another designator that they issue called U6, which is a designator that includes discouraged workers who have given up because they can't find work. They include also workers that are actively looking for work but haven't looked in the last 4 weeks. And they also include, more importantly, part-time workers who would like to be working full-time, but their employers won't allow them to do so. So the real situation is here that the U6 unemployment rate is 10.1. And according to the Gallup poll people who compared a similar comparison with U6, the rate is 14.7%. And that number is considered by economists, that U6 number, as the real unemployment number. So there are a lot of people unemployed or discouraged or looking for work that would like to be working full time. And that's the reason why, even though the jobs reports have been showing more jobs, additional jobs created by the economy, that incomes have been slow, very slow to be rising. So the thing of it is that the professional people have about 2% unemployment, and there's the people that are the poorer workers have a very high percent unemployment, probably approaching 15%, and in some large cities higher than that. The other problem with for workers is that they're not paid enough. The federal minimum wage is $7.25, and $7.25 at 2,000 hours a year would only be less than $15,000, which is less than the poverty level. So that's too low for somebody working all the time, trying to support their family, to be able to find shelter and food and transportation. So we need to do something about raising that pay to the working poor. The question is what to do. Well, in my plan, what we do is we raise the rate to pay to the working poor by paying the businesses any reimbursing them in gross pay for any pay $10 or less that they pay to employees. This is to the businesses. The way it would work would be that the businesses would pay salaries just like they do to the workers, do withholding like they do, and then the gross amount would be reimbursed by the state on a monthly basis, and then the state would be reimbursed by the federal government. What that would do would be that the businesses would be able to train people without having to incur the cost of their wages while training them, and then be able to use them for $10 or less work. And if they've been trained for higher work, at that time they would be working and generating revenues for the company. So the idea is to create jobs directly, not indirectly through incentives, investment incentives to companies, or through tax cuts and breaks that you hope trickle down to the worker. Largely, we know those don't trickle down, that a little bit goes to workers, a little more job is created. Largely, the large companies use the additional monies they have as a result of tax breaks that they're getting compensate the higher paid workers and to increase dividends and to buy back stock. So the way to get employment up, the way to hire people and to provide jobs is to create an idea that companies only get the money if they provide the jobs. And this is what my idea is. This idea I used when I was a merchant in Albion, Michigan. I was approached with a plan with someone in social services for a couple young people who had gotten in trouble. I hired them, and then I kept track of what I hired them. I sent the money to the state, and I got the gross amount back, which helped them, and I taught them some things and some responsibility, and I got some benefit of some labor. It's a good idea. It should be expanded. It's one that will work, and it will work for businesses. And small businesses then would not only not have to worry about the pay of the $10, the increases in pay up to the $10 level. They wouldn't even have to be paying for the gross wages that they're paying now at $7.25 or in that area, because those gross wages would reduce to zero. So the companies would still cover certain payroll costs and certain benefits, but they wouldn't have to pay gross wages for workers. The amounts, why it's for $10 or less, is that there would be an easy transition to do this. Well, not much would have to change to get this going. As the program gets initiated, many of the business people would compete for the laborers because they get the laborers for free to help build their businesses, and that competition would bring the wages up from the $7.25 to the $10 level. The other thing about the working poor problem is pertaining to our country. And the problem pertaining to our country is that the working poor, which is a large number of, cannot get loans to buy houses in particular, sometimes cars, sometimes other items. So we're in a situation where even with low interest rates, the home ownership has declined to levels to around the 1960 level. And renting, of course, is up higher than it has been. It increased to like 29% or something like that across the nation. And that's because people can't afford the down payment. They can't afford to make the payments, but they're barely getting by. So they pay the rent, and then the houses rise in price before they can save any money at the low pay, and they're stuck in a bad situation. Well, the thing of it is that we need to use the free enterprise system to provide work for these workers, to provide better pay, and that as a result, we get a great return as citizens of the country. Some of the benefits are these. There's more jobs and better pay for the working poor. There's lower labor costs for small business and large business as well that hire people for less than $10. The wages for training are paid. There's increases in consumer spending, and our economy consists of about 70% of 70% of our economy is consumer spending. And by increasing how much money the poor have to be able to survive, we will end up with stimulating the economy and creating growth. The growth then creates a growth cycle in which more jobs are created. It also helps the poor and the rich, and this is an important thing. Sometimes, anytime you talk about helping raising the rates of poor workers, the people that are very wealthy scream and shout that you're trying to redistribute income. That isn't how the free enterprise system works. When the poor have more money, they spend that money, they buy things, and the things they buy are manufactured by corporations, and those corporations have increased profitability, and the cycle goes on. So it's that direction we want to be in, is where we enable people who want nothing more than to work and contribute to their country to be able to have a decent enough wage to be able to make that contribution. The other thing is that my approach would help to develop entrepreneurs. People could start businesses. Not everyone is like Donald Trump, who gets $1 million from his father to start a business. A lot of people don't have a lot of money to start a business. I didn't when I started my businesses. And so there's a lot of cost in startup. There's cost of labor, there's cost of inventory, and it would be beneficial to the entrepreneurs to have some help in cash flow with the wages paid up to $10 an hour. And then even some of them would exceed and expand. Some of them may have difficulties and not make it the first try. A number of very successful business people have tried and failed at a number of businesses before they develop the expertise to really provide goods and services to the public. It also enhances competition. By enhanced competition, of course, with free enterprise, that helps to keep their prices moderate. And it reduces the need for welfare, because if you pay somebody a reasonable wage where they're not at the poverty level, then they don't require as much government support. And most importantly, it promotes the American dream for all citizens. We don't need to have a situation where people are stuck in the cities and in rural areas where they can't financially come out from where they're at and they have no hope. And in those situations, the potential for social stress is considerable. Even now, with the U3 unemployment rate at 4.9, there is an element of stress. The potential for stress is considerable if we have another recession, which we will in time. We're at 7 years into a bull market, and the country always has cycles of bull markets and recessions for a while. So we need to be aware that we need to do something that's intelligent and reasonable and honorable in terms of paying the people who are working poor. They may not like to hear the designation working poor, but they are. These are people working who want some help, not people who are trying to abuse the system in some way. The cost of my Fair Jobs plan is, I estimate, to be $80 billion per year. That's a lot of money. But I want to compare the cost of Donald Trump's proposed tax cut of 10 trillion in 10 years is $1 trillion a year. $1 trillion is 1,000 billion per year. So we would have 1,000 billion a year in lost revenue if Donald Trump were to some way become president, which would be disastrous for our federal debt and deficit, which you can check my website to see that article. But also, then contrasting with Hillary Clinton, she's proposed so far in a general way big business investment incentives, and those in the past have been thrown out there at high levels, and they've resulted in large corporations paying little or no money. There's an undetermined amount of loss of revenues we would have from such a plan, but largely big business gets bigger, big government gets much larger, because they have to have whole departments to monitor whether the corporate investment incentives are being abused or not. And the thing of it is, with those, they're unfair. When you go into a city like Detroit, there are a lot of business that have stayed there and have been supporting their customer base for years and years. And then someone gets in and says, okay, let's have a big incentive program for new companies to come in. And they come in with the same products and services, but they're not paying taxes. And the ones that have been there are paying taxes. And so that's a bad approach. And all we seem to do is have these big, massive, bad approaches for what is really a simple solution, and that is to pay small business and even large business the money only when the jobs are created. And then you're getting job creation, and it's fair to everybody. And as a matter of fact, the ones that have been in the large cities already will have an edge in timing. My Fair Jobs plan helps more than the working poor. My corporate tax plan would bring in about 200 billion additional dollars per year by eliminating corporate tax loopholes. If we used about 100 billion of that dollars annually for bridges, roads, ports, any number of infrastructure projects, we would create considerable employment for skilled workers as well as professionals. So my jobs plan also would enable that to happen. In addition, my jobs plan would address the problem of gender pay discrimination. Uh, I saw Hillary Clinton say in an ad that no, that she would make sure that men and women got equal pay, in so many words, for work. And it was a short clip on an advertisement. That sounds real good. What's her plan? Anybody can say that. Anybody can say that they like jobs, but what's their plan? Anybody can say they want equality in the job market, but what's their plan? Uh, the point is, on mine, if Donald Trump has put forth no plan to deal with gender discrimination. Uh, Hillary's, if you try to follow hers, if you get more government involvement, more rules, more departments, it's difficult to ever prove job discrimination, especially in a white collar environment, because I was in that environment. There are different levels of experience, different speaking abilities, different poise, different abilities to work with others and different technical knowledge, among other things. So it's hard to prove that somebody's being paid unfairly in a corporate structure environment. And so there'd be legal issues and all of that. You don't need all of that. You got to take a more simple, efficient, less costly approach. And we could follow the lead of our neighbors in Europe. Germany in 2015 passed a law that required corporations to have 30% women representation on board of directors, and that's a good idea. The women have been in the business world and in all aspects of professional services for many years. When I went to school at Michigan State University, there were more women students than men, and that was way back in late 1960s and early 1970s. Excuse me. So the point is, women need to be represented more fairly in the corporate boardrooms. And right now, by the Standard and Poor's businesses, they're at 17% of representation. They should be brought, of course, to at least 30 by now. There are some that would advocate that it would be more. It wouldn't be difficult to do. Without firing anybody, they could even add a few board members. But you do that because eventually you get a board that is sympathetic with the difficulties that women face in the job market. But again, it's a plan. You don't have to like my plan. A lot of businesses wouldn't like my plan. We need to expect more of presidential candidates than saying vague generalities of what they're going to do, some of which it isn't even their constitutional responsibility to do, and some of which they don't have any plans for doing anyway at the present time. So let's do a job creation comparison. Donald Trump's plan basically is engaging in highly damaging trade wars. I mean, he said over and over, the trade is horrible. Our trade deficit with China, with all of these places, is a problem. You get into trade wars, and there's loss of employment all over the place. Trade does not necessarily decrease jobs. We have even this Trans-Pacific that they're talking about would remove barriers so that Boeing, Caterpillar, a number of companies would sell more equipment, farmers could sell more of what they sell. And so there's benefits to trade. All trade is not bad. We are a net importer of oil. If we didn't trade and get that oil, then our economy would come to a screeching halt. So trade is not bad. We, of course, run a deficit on oil. That's part of that dollar deficit that he's so uncomfortable with. With Hillary, the basic idea of big business, corporate welfare is what we've tried. It's failed. Corporations don't pay the taxes, so somebody has to pay them. Individuals have to pay them, and corporate taxes are too low. And as a result, the employment problems still persist. My plan is to nurture the free enterprise system, which would help small business and some large businesses and create wealth for all. I would like to say in closing that the reason I did not discuss job creation plans of Bernie Sanders, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, or John Kasich is that all of them have even less specific ideas than Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. You know, however my campaign goes or not, we the people should require much more of presidential candidates than standing on stages making inappropriate innuendos, shouting at each other. What are their plans that they have that would help our country? And if they have no plans, then turn off the debate if that's all we're going to hear. Thank you for your time again. Have a nice day. Goodbye.